The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through radio telescopes across Earth simultaneously. At the Seoul National Observatory, Dr. Joo Park stared at her monitor in disbelief. "Taemin, come look at this pattern," she called to her colleague. Dr. Taemin Kim abandoned his coffee and hurried over. "Is that? It's artificial, and it's not from Earth." Joo's hands trembled as she adjusted her glasses. For 15 years, she had scanned the stars for signs of intelligent life. Now, on an ordinary Tuesday, the proof was flashing on her screen. A sequence too perfect, too structured to be natural cosmic noise. Taemin leaned closer, his expression shifting from doubt to awe. "The pattern repeats, but with variations. Like language," Joo finished. "We need to alert the director." Within hours, observatories across the planet confirmed they had received the same signal. From Chile to Australia, from Hawaii to South Africa, identical data streamed in from the same distant point in space. Government officials were notified, and a global team of scientists assembled virtually to analyze the message. Joo barely slept for the next 3 days. She worked alongside linguists, mathematicians, and computer scientists, trying to decode what appeared to be an alien communication. The first breakthrough came when Hana, a gifted mathematician from Daejeon, recognized that the opening sequence represented prime numbers, a universal mathematical concept that transcended human language. "It's a key," Hana explained during their video conference. "They're establishing mathematical common ground before moving to more complex communication." The team used this insight to begin deciphering the message. Progress was slow but steady. By the end of the week, they had translated basic conceptual markers. After 2 weeks, they understood enough to realize this was not merely a greeting. It was a cry for help. The message came from beings who called themselves the Astra, a civilization orbiting a star approximately 40 light-years from Earth. Their star was becoming unstable, entering the early stages of a process that would ultimately destroy their entire system. Joo sat alone in her office late one night, reviewing the translation again. The Astra had included detailed schematics of their world, their biology, and astonishingly, technical blueprints that seemed to suggest methods of travel beyond current human capabilities. "They're not just telling us they're dying," she murmured to herself. "They're asking us to save them." The revelation seemed impossible. Humanity had barely established a permanent presence on Mars. Interstellar travel existed only in theory and fiction. Yet here was an advanced civilization, apparently far more technologically developed than Earth, asking humans for rescue. When the translation team shared their findings with world leaders, the initial response was skepticism bordering on dismissal. "Even if this message is authentic, there's nothing we can do," said the European Space Agency director during a closed meeting. "The technological leap required is beyond our reach." But Joo couldn't accept this answer. She reviewed the technical specifications included in the message, which seemed to describe a propulsion system unlike anything humans had developed. The Astra had shared this knowledge deliberately. "They wouldn't ask if they thought it was impossible," she argued. "Look at these equations. They're showing us how to build something that could reach them." Subin, a quantum physicist on the team, spent days analyzing the technical data. "These principles, they're extensions of theories we've only recently begun exploring. The math checks out. Theoretically, what they're suggesting could work." The timeline was tight. According to the Astra's message, their star would become uninhabitable within 3 Earth years. If humanity were to attempt a rescue, they would need to develop and launch a mission within 18 months. "Why us?" asked Director Minjin during a tense meeting with government officials. "If they're so advanced, why can't they save themselves?" The answer came as they decoded more of the message. The Astra had indeed built evacuation ships, but they could only save a fraction of their population. Their message had been sent to multiple star systems, with the slim hope that someone might respond. Public reaction was mixed when news of the message was officially released. Some called it a hoax. Religious groups debated its significance. Scientists argued about its authenticity, but among ordinary people, a powerful sentiment emerged. If there was even a small chance to save another civilization, didn't humanity have a moral obligation to try? Juwu found herself becoming the public face of the response effort, explaining the message in terms everyone could understand. They reached out across the stars to ask for our help, she told reporters. They believe in us more than we believe in ourselves. Slowly, momentum gathered. Research facilities around the world began examining the Astra's technical data. Private aerospace companies offered resources. Universities redirected research. A name emerged for the initiative: Project Lifeline. As summer turned to fall, Ju stood at her observatory window, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization waited, hoping their message had found someone willing to answer. "We heard you," she whispered to the stars. "We're coming." "This is preposterous," declared Director Cook of the Korean Space Agency. "Interstellar travel. We barely made it to Mars." Similar conversations play out in government offices worldwide, but when the message leaked online, something unexpected happened. People rallied. Protesters gathered outside space agencies. Hashtags trended. Children wrote letters to presidents. In an emergency UN session, representatives from 194 nations voted unanimously to pool resources. Former enemies shared military technology. Private corporations opened their patents. The Astra Initiative became humanity's singular focus. Jinwoo Lee, a propulsion engineer from Busan, proposed combining the alien specifications with Earth's experimental antimatter technology. "It's theoretically possible," he told the International Committee. "We just need everyone working together." The leak happened on a rainy Thursday. No one knew who shared the classified files about the alien message, but within hours, the information spread across every social media platform. Videos explaining the Astra's plea for help went viral. Experts debated on news channels. Regular people tried to understand what it all meant. At first, governments tried to control the narrative. "This is merely a scientific curiosity," they claimed. "Nothing can be done." But Sumi, a college student in Incheon, started a simple online petition. Answer their call. She expected a few hundred signatures. By morning, it had 10 million. By the weekend, over 1 billion people had signed. Outside the Korean Space Agency, thousands gathered with handmade signs. "We can help them." Read one. "Humanity's greatest test." Read another. Similar scenes played out in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, London, and New Delhi. Director Hike stared out his office window at the growing crowd. "This is getting out of hand," he told his assistant. "Sir," she replied, handing him the latest report. "It's not just happening here." The report showed global production of semiconductors had voluntarily shifted toward potential components for the mission. Universities worldwide had redirected research funding. Ordinary citizens were donating money to a hastily established international fund. 7 days after the leak, the UN called an emergency session. Representatives arrived to find their city's citizens watching, waiting. For once, the world was united in attention. "We face an unprecedented situation," began the Secretary General. "A civilization we have never met has asked for our help. The question before us is not whether we can help, but whether we will try." The debate lasted 16 hours. Nations raised concerns about cost, feasibility, and risks. But as the discussion continued, a remarkable shift occurred. Countries began offering resources instead of objections. "South Korea will share our quantum computing research," announced their representative. "Russia offers our advanced propulsion technology," said another. "The United States will open our classified antimatter containment research," declared the American delegate. By morning, all 194 nations had voted to form the International Astra Response Coalition. Former enemies who had pointed nuclear weapons at each other now pledged to work side by side. Private corporations that had jealously guarded their patents now freely shared their technology. Jinwoo Lee had worked on experimental propulsion systems for 15 years. When he studied the alien schematics, he saw something that others had missed. Their drive system uses principles similar to our theoretical work on antimatter containment, he explained to the newly formed scientific committee. If we combine our approaches, we might achieve what neither of us could do alone. His team worked around the clock. Scientists who didn't speak the same language collaborated through translation software. Engineers from 30 countries contributed designs. Factories across 6 continents began building components. 3 months after the message was received, a test of the combined human Astra drive technology produced 1% of the thrust needed for interstellar travel. It wasn't enough, but it proved the concept could work. We're still not there, Jinwoo told the committee. The power requirements are beyond anything we've built before. That's when Nari Cho, a quiet nuclear engineer from Daejeon, spoke up. What if we use all the power? What do you mean? Asked the committee chair. I mean, what if we redirect the entire electrical output of a country for just 30 seconds? The idea seemed impossible, but after running simulations, the team realized it could work. A global power-sharing agreement was drafted. Nations would take turns providing massive energy surges to test and eventually power the drive. 6 months into the project, the first full-scale prototype was ready. Built in international waters on a converted oil platform, it represented technology from every major nation on Earth. As the test approached, billions watched online. Power grids across Asia coordinated to channel electricity to the testing site. For 30 seconds, lights dimmed across a continent as energy flowed into the experimental drive. The test succeeded beyond expectations. The prototype generated thrust equivalent to what would be needed for interstellar travel. People cheered in streets worldwide. News channels showed celebrations in Moscow, Tokyo, Cairo, Rio de Janeiro, and New York. That evening, at the main command center, Jinwoo stood before a wall of screens showing teams from around the world. Everyone was exhausted but smiling. This is just the beginning, he told them. Now we build the real thing. Outside, a child held up a sign to a news camera. It showed a simple drawing, Earth and another planet, with a rocket flying between them. Below it was written in crayon, "We are coming to help you." 6 months later, the Starship Unity prepared for launch, crewed by 12 of Earth's finest. Captain Do-yeon stood on the bridge, watching Earth shrink through the viewscreen. Beside him, Communications Officer Minji adjusted her headset. "Status report," he asked. "Engineering reports drive functioning at 104% efficiency," Minji replied. "Medical is secure. We're on course." The journey pushed them to their limits. A radiation storm nearly destroyed their shielding. The quantum navigation system failed twice. As they approached the Astra system, they witnessed the horrifying sight of a star beginning to collapse. "We have less than 3 days," Science Officer Jae-yeon announced grimly, "and billions to evacuate." The Unity was the greatest achievement in human history. Built in orbit around Earth, the massive ship contained technology from every nation. Its hull gleamed in the sunlight as final preparations for launch were completed. Captain Do-yeon walked through the ship one last time, checking each section. He stopped to speak with each crew member. They were the best Earth had to offer. Scientists, engineers, doctors, and pilots from around the world. "Are you ready?" he asked Engineer Kyung, who had designed much of the propulsion system. She nodded, her face serious. "The drive is stable. If the alien specifications are correct, we should reach the Astra system in 26 days. 26 days to travel 40 light-years. The idea still seemed impossible to Do-yeon. No human had ever traveled beyond the moon, and now they would cross the stars. The launch countdown began. On Earth, billions watched on screens. Schools paused classes. Workplaces stopped. Everyone held their breath as the final seconds ticked away. "Unity, you are cleared for launch," came the voice from Mission Control. "Acknowledged," Do-yeon replied. "Activating main drive." The ship hummed as power built in its core. There was no dramatic blast of fire, no roar of engines. Instead, space itself seemed to bend around the Unity. Stars blurred. Earth vanished. They were on their way. The first days passed smoothly. The crew settled into their routines. Minji established regular communication with Earth. Jaehyun monitored the star maps. Medical Officer Subin checked everyone's health daily. On day 7, Dohyun called the crew together. "We're approaching 1/4 of our journey. All systems are functioning well. I'm proud of each of you." They shared a meal together, talking about their homes, their families. For a moment, it felt almost normal, just people sharing stories. But when they looked out the windows, the unfamiliar stars reminded them of how far they had traveled. On day 12, disaster struck. "Captain," Kyung's voice came urgently over the ship's system. "We're heading into a radiation storm. Our sensors didn't detect it until now." Dohyun rushed to the bridge. Through the view screen, he could see strange light patterns ahead. "Raise all shields," he ordered. "Everyone to safety stations." The storm hit with tremendous force. The ship shook. Lights flickered. In engineering, Kyung worked desperately to maintain shield power. "Shields at 30% and falling," she reported. "Captain, we can't take much more of this." Dohyun made a quick decision. Drop to minimal life support. Direct all power to shields. The ship went dark except for emergency lighting. The temperature began to fall. The crew put on thermal suits and huddled together as the storm raged outside. For 6 hours, they drifted. When the storm finally passed, they had survived. But barely. 3 of the shield generators were damaged beyond repair. The quantum navigation system had failed completely. "Can we continue?" Dohyun asked Kyung. She looked exhausted but nodded. "We can reboot the navigation system, but it will take time. And without full shields, we're vulnerable." They worked around the clock to repair what they could. 2 days later, they were moving again, but slower than before. On day 19, the navigation system failed again. This time, Engineer Yubin found the problem. "The alien calculations didn't account for this region of space," he explained. "Something here interferes with our systems." They had to recalibrate everything manually. Jaehyun stayed awake for 36 hours, making complex calculations. Finally, they were back on course. As they approached day 25, excitement mixed with tension. They would soon reach the Astra system. Minji tried to send signals ahead, but received no response. "Could we be too late?" she asked quietly. No one answered. The thought had haunted them all. On day 26, they arrived. The view screen showed a star system unlike anything they had ever seen. The star at its center pulsed unevenly, its surface writhing with massive solar flares. Around it, planets moved in unstable orbits. "Life signs?" Dohyun asked. Jaehyun checked his instruments. "Yes. The 4th planet shows massive life readings. Billions of them. The Astra are still alive." Relief flooded the bridge, but it was short-lived. As they approached the 4th planet, their sensors gave them a clearer picture of the star. "Captain," Jaehyun said, his voice suddenly tense, "the star's collapse is accelerating. According to these readings, the system will become uninhabitable in less than 3 days." Dohyun stared at the screen. Their ship had barely enough room for the 12 of them. How could they possibly save billions? "Open a channel to the planet," he ordered. Minji worked at her console. "Channel open, Captain." Dohyun took a deep breath. "This is Captain Dohyun of the Earth vessel Unity. We received your message. We are here to help." For a long moment, there was silence. Then a voice responded, musical, strange, but speaking perfect English. "Earth vessel Unity, this is the Astra High Council. We had almost lost hope. Welcome to our system. Please hurry. Our time is running out." The Astra were beautiful beings with translucent skin that captured and reflected light. Their leader, introduced as the Grand Coordinator, seemed bewildered by the humans' arrival. You came for us, a species you never met. That's what humans do, Do-hyun explained. The Astra technology was centuries beyond Earth's, yet they faced extinction because their rigid case system prevented innovation outside established parameters. They had focused entirely on building enormous evacuation vessels, too few to save everyone. It was engineer Sujin who proposed the solution. What if we network your smaller vessels together? We can use Earth's swarm coordination algorithms to move thousands of ships in perfect harmony. The Grand Coordinator stared. But transportation has always been hierarchical. Sometimes, Minji said gently, salvation comes from breaking patterns. The Unity landed on a vast platform floating above the Astra capital city. As the airlock opened, the crew stood in nervous silence. None of them knew what to expect. The first Astra stepped forward to greet them. The humans gasped. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin like crystal that seemed to capture and bend light. As it moved, colors rippled across its body. I am the Grand Coordinator, it said in a voice that sounded like chimes. Welcome to our world. The humans introduced themselves one by one. The Astra watched them with large, multifaceted eyes that reflected their images back like mirrors. You're so small, the Grand Coordinator said. And solid. We did not expect this. We did not expect you either, Do-hyun replied honestly. But we came as soon as we received your message. The Grand Coordinator tilted its head. You came for us, a species you never met. That's what humans do, Do-hyun explained. We help when we can. The Astra led them to a vast hall where other tall, crystalline beings waited. Jae-hyun scanned everything with his devices, his eyes wide with wonder. Their technology is incredible, he whispered to Sujin. Look at these energy readings. The Grand Coordinator showed them holographic plans of the evacuation efforts. The Astra had built 12 massive ships, each capable of carrying millions of their kind. But their population numbered in the billions. We can only save those of the first light and second light castes, the Grand Coordinator explained. The others must remain. That's unacceptable, Do-hyun said firmly. We need to find a way to save everyone. The Astra seemed confused by this response. But the lower castes are lesser. They serve the higher castes. Minji stepped forward. On Earth, we believe all lives have value. The Grand Coordinator led them to a massive window overlooking the city. Below, they could see thousands of smaller ships sitting unused on landing pads. What are those? Sujin asked. Personal vessels, cargo transports, worker carriers, answered the Grand Coordinator. They are not suitable for evacuation. Sujin studied the ships carefully. How many of these smaller vessels do you have? Perhaps 30,000. But they cannot travel between stars without a guide ship. Sujin's eyes lit up. Captain, I have an idea. She turned to the Grand Coordinator. Your large ships, they have advanced navigation systems, correct? Yes, the most sophisticated in our history. What if we networked all your ships together? The large ones could guide the smaller ones. The Grand Coordinator's skin flickered with doubtful colors. That is not how our fleet operates. Each ship must have its own guidance. Sujin smiled. On Earth, we've developed systems where simple units work together in coordination. We call it swarm intelligence. Birds do it naturally. Our computers do it artificially. She pulled out her tablet and showed a simulation of birds flying in formation. See how they move as one, even though each bird is independent. The Astra gathered around, their crystalline bodies reflecting the light from the screen. We could adapt your navigation systems to create a network, Sujin continued. The large ships would lead, and the smaller ships would follow in perfect formation. The Grand Coordinator's skin turned a deep blue. But transportation has always been hierarchical. Each ship, like each Astra, must know its place. Sometimes, Minji said gently, salvation comes from breaking patterns. For 3 hours, They debated. The Astra of the highest caste resisted the idea. But as the star outside flared more violently, their resistance weakened. Finally, the Grand Coordinator raised a hand for silence. "We will try this. Swarm method." The next day was a blur of activity. Sujin and Kyung worked with Astra engineers to modify their navigation systems. Jae-hyun helped calculate the complex flight patterns needed for thousands of ships to move in coordination. Minji developed a simple communication protocol that all pilots could follow. The Astra Society began to change before their eyes. Lower caste members were trained as pilots for the smaller ships. The rigid hierarchy that had defined their civilization for millennia started to bend. On the second day, they ran a test. 100 small ships launched, following a single large vessel in perfect formation. The sight of the ships moving together across the sky caused the Astra in the city below to emit a harmonic sound that the humans realized was cheering. That night, the Grand Coordinator's skin glowed with new colors as it addressed the human crew. For 10,000 years, we have believed that only by maintaining perfect order could we achieve greatness. We never considered that sometimes adaptation requires disorder. It turned to Do-hyun. "You have changed more than our evacuation plans. You have changed our understanding of ourselves." Outside, the star flared again, more violently than before. They all knew their time was running out. "Tomorrow," Do-hyun said, "we begin the real evacuation." As the last transport cleared the system, the star erupted in a spectacular nova that would have annihilated all life. Billions of Astra, now refugees, headed toward their new home. "We misjudged your species," the Grand Coordinator told Do-hyun. "We thought technology was the measure of advancement. But your greatest strength is your capacity for unity despite differences." When news reached Earth, celebrations erupted globally. Old conflicts seemed petty in light of what humanity had accomplished together. The unity returned 6 months later, with Astra representatives who offered to share their knowledge. Together, they established the Galactic Concord, an alliance dedicated to mutual aid and cooperation among stars. In the centuries that followed, the story of Earth's response to a desperate plea became legend. Not because humans were the strongest or most advanced, but because when called upon, they had proven that compassion could cross the stars. The evacuation began at dawn. Across the Astra homeworld, people boarded ships of all sizes. The 12 massive vessels took position at the front of the formation. Behind them, thousands of smaller ships prepared to follow. From the Unity, Do-hyun and his crew monitored everything. Sujin had worked through the night, making final adjustments to the swarm navigation system. "All ships report ready," Minji announced. Do-hyun nodded. "Give the signal." The first wave launched, one large ship leading 500 smaller ones. They rose into the sky like a flock of birds, moving in perfect harmony. As they cleared the atmosphere, a second wave followed, then a third. On the planet below, millions watched as their salvation took shape above them. For the first time in their history, Astra of all castes worked side by side, helping each other board the vessels. In orbit, Jae-hyun monitored the star. "Captain, activity is increasing. We may have less time than we thought." Do-hyun's face remained calm, but his hands tightened on the edge of his chair. "How long?" "At this rate, complete nova in less than 30 hours. Do-hyun turned to Minji. "Tell them to speed up the launches." The evacuation continued through the night. Ship after ship rose from the surface, joining the growing fleet in space. The Unity moved among them, helping coordinate the massive movement. By morning, half the population was in space, but the star was becoming more unstable with each passing hour. Massive flares erupted from its surface. The planet's temperature began to rise dangerously. "We need to get the last ships up now," Do-hyun ordered. The final evacuation became more desperate. The lower atmosphere was becoming difficult to navigate as the star's radiation affected weather patterns. Some ships struggled to maintain formation as they launched. From the Unity, Kyung used emergency thrusters to help guide the struggling vessels. "Stay in formation." She called over the communication system. "Follow the lead ship." 26 hours after the evacuation began, the last ship left the Astra homeworld. Behind them, the planet's oceans were beginning to boil away. The fleet moved toward the jump point where they would begin their journey to their new home. A star system the Astra probes had identified years before. "All ships accounted for," Minji reported, her voice thick with emotion. "We did it, Captain. Every single Astra is safe." The crew of the Unity cheered, but their celebration was cut short as Jae-hyun shouted a warning. "The star! It's going now." Through the view screens, they watched as the star that had given life to the Astra for millions of years began its final death. The surface bulged outward. Light brighter than anything they had ever seen erupted from its core. "All ships, maximum speed," Do-hyun ordered. The fleet accelerated. The Unity took position at the rear, helping ensure no ship fell behind. As the last transport cleared the danger zone, the star erupted in a spectacular nova that would have annihilated all life in the system. The shockwave hit them minutes later. The ships rocked but held formation. When the turbulence passed, they continued their journey in perfect order. In the Unity's meeting room, the Grand Coordinator's skin glowed with deep blue and gold patterns. "We misjudged your species," it told Do-hyun. "We thought technology was the measure of advancement, but your greatest strength is your capacity for unity despite differences." Do-hyun smiled. "We're not perfect. We still have much to learn." "As do we," the Grand Coordinator replied. "Perhaps we can learn together." The journey to the new Astra homeworld took 3 weeks. The Unity stayed with them, helping establish the first settlements. When it was time for the humans to return home, the Grand Coordinator presented them with a gift, a data crystal containing advanced scientific knowledge. "Share this with all your people," it said, "as we now share our future." The Unity began its journey back to Earth, its mission accomplished beyond anyone's expectations. During the long voyage home, the crew sent regular updates to Earth. 6 months after they had departed, the Unity returned to orbit around their blue planet. As they descended toward the landing site, they saw something unexpected. Millions of people gathered to welcome them home. Every nation had sent representatives. Screens around the world showed their return. Children waved flags showing both Earth and the crystalline shape of an Astra. When Do-hyun and his crew stepped out of their ship, they were joined by 3 Astra representatives who had chosen to come to Earth. The crowd fell silent at the sight of the tall, shimmering beings. Then someone began to clap. The sound spread until millions were applauding. The Astra's skin rippled with colors of surprise and joy. In the years that followed, humans and Astra worked together to establish what became known as the Galactic Concord, an alliance dedicated to mutual aid and cooperation among stars. The Astra helped humanity develop new technologies. Humans helped the Astra create a more equal society. Other intelligent species were eventually discovered. Some were more advanced, others less so, but all were welcomed into the Concord. In schools across 1,000 worlds, children of many species learned the story of how it all began, with a desperate message and the unexpected response that saved a civilization. Not because humans were the strongest or most advanced, but because when called upon, they had proven that compassion could cross the stars. The end.